So authorities are urged to monitor terror financing activities of the Islamic State within South Africa's borders. According to the National Terror Financing Risk Assessment Report, the threat is from supporters of terror groups as well as its affiliates. For more on this report, let's now speak to Willem Els, who is a senior training coordinator on terrorism and explosive related incidents at the Institute for Security Studies. Willem, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. How concerned should South Africa be over this report?
Good morning to you. I think South Africa should be very concerned because in 2022, South Africa has been rated by the FATF or the Financial Task Team, and our risk has been rated as moderate. So the next rating that we received earlier this year, and on which this report has been based, they upped it to high. So that is very concerning. Even though South Africa have been putting some things in place and they've been working on that, it seems that it was not enough and that the risk is now moved to high.
Yeah, and how is that determined, considering, as you say, that the various financial institutions in South Africa have been responding to some of the issues that were raised by the Financial Action Task Force that they have to fix? So why does it seem that the outcome is regressive instead of being progressive?
Yeah, what they are looking at your financial intelligence systems. They also have a very good analysis that they do based on financial intelligence that has been monitored with South Africa, and also the other 12 countries in Africa that are currently being grey listed are being monitored. That's a part of the 20 that are in the world currently that are grey listed. So what they do is based on intelligence, a thorough analysis of the financial intelligence system and the money flows in the country and out of the country. They base this assessment on that. But also what they look at, the systems that we have in place, but they also look at our competence in dealing with the threat. That means that how are we dealing with your transnational organized crime? That is the nexus with that, and terrorism is there, and the financing is there. But also, how are we progressing with addressing these crimes and these things in court? And we don't see a lot of that currently happening, and that is concerning.
Yeah. What do we know about the Financial Intelligence Center? Because they also bear the responsibility through legislation to ensure that there is no money that leaves the country that is going to go out to fund terrorism.
Yeah, the Financial Intelligence Center, they have been strengthened by legislation, the amendment to the Act as well. We see that additional funding has also been allocated to them in the last budget in order to capacitate them, in order to monitor more effectively. Because at the end of the day, they are monitoring, but your financial institutions and your other institutions that are accountable to do the reporting to them, if they do not monitor them effectively, and the monitoring is not being done and they're not policing it effectively, then of course, we are not going to reach our objectives with the center.
Yeah, how bad is South Africa or Southern Africa compared to what's happening in the other regions, including, for instance, ECOWAS? And I see that the U.S. Ambassador Robert Wood, who is the alternate representative for the Special Political Affairs, on the 19th of June, told the United Nations Security Council around issues relating to the Sahel. He says the global epicenter of terrorism deaths, and this threat cannot be addressed without a partnership. So how is Southern Africa comparing to the other regional counterparts?
South Africa is not comparing very well to them. If you look at SADC, you look at the number of countries in our region that are being grey listed. We look at Namibia that is on the list. We look at Zambia that's on the list, Tanzania. We look at South Africa, Mozambique, Seychelles, to go on. And as I mentioned, there are only 12 countries currently in Africa that are on the list. And so the bulk of them also seems to come from our region. So our region is not as compared to the Sahel in terms of terror activities. we do not compare that unfavorably to them. It's much more prevalent there, even though the main hotspots in our region is, of course, the eastern parts of the DRC, as well as northern Mozambique. That proves to be troublesome. And also, those are some of the destinations where some of this funding has been allocated from South Africa, according to the report.
Yeah, then very interesting also, Willem, in the report is what they call the domestic threats. And it speaks here about South Africa also faces a right-wing extremist threat and can be regarded as a fertile breeding ground for white supremacists as well as hate groups. Explain to us what we're dealing with here and what this report is insinuating.
Yeah, that is actually very interesting, because South Africa is the only country in Africa that seems to have that challenge of a right wing as well as your left wing threat. So what we've seen in the recent past, there have been some convictions of some right-wing organizations, especially if we think back about the Crusaders in the Middelburg, where we had a successful prosecution in recent months. So that remains a threat, because those groups are active in South Africa. The conditions conducive for these groups are, of course, there if there is dissent with the political system, and if people are feeling marginalized, and all these other drivers that are there for radicalization. So that is a concern, and that is also been mentioned in the report, that it should be effectively monitored.
Is it known what is fueling or influencing this right-wing extremist threat?
Well, you've got your common root causes for radicalization and fueling, as you say, and some of them are your sense of marginalization, exclusion, etc. You know, when people feel that they go to the voting booth and their voice is not being heard, etc., etc. Those are all things that are creating a perfect breeding ground for these groups to operate and, of course, to grow. So South Africa will have to look at our policies. We will have to look also at our monitoring in order to monitor these groups effectively.
Do you think that this is something that should be placed on the agenda of the national dialogue that has been called for by the former President Thabo Mbeki and now also President Cyril Ramaphosa, and it also features in that statement of intent of the Government of National Unity?
I think so, based on our history, because, we had some years ago, we had the Burma trial where there were actually two attempts on the life of the former President Mandela by these groups. So, that is something that's been with us for some time. It's not something that's going away unless we address the root causes. So I believe that, as you said, it should be on the dialogue. We should look at the inclusion of all the communities in South Africa in order to prevent these type of radicalization.
Willem, thank you so much for your time. Willem Els is from the Institute for Security Studies.